Welcome in to the Bro 4 Squad podcast, where we are just a bunch of bros drinking beer and talking movies. This is our spoilers review of The Strangers, Chapter 1. I am your host, the Mayor Jeff Hornacek, joined by our legal counsel, Ronnie Cycli, to review this movie as we do all of our movie reviews using the 5 Bro 4 Squad criteria, which is the acting, the story, our favorite scene, the movie's rewatchability, and then its impact going forward. Ronnie Cycli, before we dive into The Strangers Chapter 1, important context for our listeners at home. And again, this is a spoilers-heavy review, so if you haven't seen the movie, go see it. Keep us in your pocket on your phone and the podcast app. Pause it, and then the second you get out, play it again. But before we get into The Strangers Chapter 1, what is your relationship like with the Strangers franchise, both the 2008 one and then the sequel, Pray at Night, coming into this film?
So the 2008 one is by far one of the best slasher killer movies I've ever seen, and one of the best movie-going experiences I've ever had. I believe we saw this together. We were in college, but I think we saw this together. And I'll never forget. I think we saw it opening weekend, and the first one, the ambiance, the vibe, the attitude in general just sold the movie. I really do feel like a movie-going experience can influence how you feel about a movie. And that one, every person, I still remember the person next to me freaking out. I didn't know them, and the yelling from the crowd. The people just like
I covered my eyes.
Like that movie. It's the one flaw when you do a movie like that is it's hard to replicate, and we'll get that about this movie. But it's also hard to replicate on rewatches, right? Like once you've seen it first time, even watching The Strangers, revisiting it now, it still will never scare you like it did that first time, but you'll always remember. And then Pray at Night, I did see, I think I went with my wife in theaters. I enjoyed it for what it was. It was obviously not as scary as the first one. I think they went in a different direction, which I appreciate in a different way. It has one iconic scene, but I did enjoy it. I do feel like, before we get into this, there was a lot. It's interesting to me that we're now getting a trilogy when it felt like there was a lot of momentum in 2008 and they didn't do anything. And then they waited 10 years for a sequel. It seems like they've dropped the ball, and maybe that's where they're at now, is trying to pick that back up.
Yeah, I actually think Pray at Night, you and Brian Banner reviewed that like way back at the beginning of our channel. If you guys want to check that out. I have not seen Pray at Night for some reason, because the 2008 Strangers, I believe, is the scariest movie I've ever seen in my life. And that's not hyperbole. I think I've maintained that throughout the lifetime of the pod. And a big part of it, like you said, was due to the theater-going experience, but also the visceral nature of the movie and its lack of any bells and whistles or tricks to try and scare you. It's just, it feels very, very real. And it like this visceral experience of like, there's not a lot of music happening. There's not a lot of jump scares. It's the entire time. It feels like someone is breaking into your home, and
they're smart characters too.
Yeah.
Like in the original.
So that leads us to The Strangers Chapter 1. And again, real quick, I know there's a lot of prefacing here, but this is a franchise that you and I know we're very excited to see it come back, but also I don't think we fully, at least when I went to go see this, did not understand the plan of it. So this movie claims to not be a remake or a reboot of the original. I think it's both. What do you think?
Yeah, maybe that's what they're saying. It's not either. That's the dumbest thing when I read that. I was like, you cannot watch this movie, and we're going to get heavily into this. If you're a fan of the first one, this is almost a shot-for-shot remake. It's just not as good. Yeah. Like, how can you not call that a reboot or a remake? Like, that's wildly insane.
You would really be having to do some mental gymnastics to tell me that, number one, this isn't a remake. I mean, like you said, take out like the first 12 minutes of it, and it's pretty much the exact same movie. And that's not necessarily a complaint. But number two, just literally in terms of the timeline of it, like someone has an iPhone in it.
Yeah.
Like it can't be it's chapter 1, so inherently that it can't come before the other one.
I think the problem with the movie is, and we're again going to get into this, I think it's easy to look at it from the lens of like, this is an individual movie, whereas the filmmakers are looking at it as like one movie told over 3 parts. And so when you have 2/3 of the movie be very new, maybe that's where they're saying not a reboot, remake. But looking at this movie as its own, that's the most insane statement.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Well, all right, let's dive in. Our first category of the Bro 4 Squad criteria is the acting and the cast. And I will say the original Strangers with Liv Tyler and Scott Speedman. Although it's not very narrative driven, their characters' relationship and the time in it with when the strangers start fucking with them and basically come into their lives is a really interesting jumping off point for a movie. In this, we get Madeline Petch as Maya and Ryan Brown as Jeff, who basically like the main characters we have, but also for the first time ever, we do actually meet some other characters in the Stranger Universe. And I think you and I talked about this before we got on pod. What?
Who did you just say played? Said someone played Jeff?
Ryan. This says Jeff Morrell on IMDb.
That's so funny. Why have someone Froy Gutierrez as Ryan?
Unless IMDb switched it. This is Ryan Bound as Jeff Morrell. Is it the other way around? Is it Jeff Morrell playing Ryan Bound?
I'm just looking at Froy Gutierrez as the main actor.
Oh, sorry. Who is Jeff then? Whatever. Yeah, you're right. Froy Gutierrez is Ryan, I guess, but Jeff Morrell is someone in the movie too. Either way, IMDb, the order that they have listed the cast in is not making sense. But
I wonder if it's one of those kids.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Ryan and Maya are the two main characters. Madeline Petch, and you're right, Froy Gutierrez. But Jeff Morrell is listed as second build. Anyway, the point stands is that this one we actually meet other characters with dialogue, and I don't believe, correct me if I'm wrong, in the first Strangers, there's any dialogue outside of the guy from Glenn Howerton's brief role in it, and then the one stranger at the end. So what do you think of the acting and cast here? I know not a lot of heavy lifting done by them, but I do think we'll get more in the coming sequel.
Yeah, I thought Madeline Petch as Maya was fine. Like, I think she really played the naturalness well. Like, girl moving to a new city on a road trip, kind of naive, little quirky, and
it's a little like obvious.
She's vegetarian.
It's a little obvious I could die horror trope where they're like making all these fun plans for the future.
Yeah. Their life is all ahead of them, and
nothing bad's gonna happen.
He says, "I'll love you till the day I die," and I'm like, "Oh, then little do they know that's only in a few hours."
Not a big commitment, bud.
I think she was good. I don't think she was the problem. I felt like she sold most of it really well. Like the scene where she gets the nail through the hand definitely had me gagging a little bit. I think her scare scenes where she's screaming, her fearfulness, really well done. I can talk about the character was kind of dumb and obviously has the worst peripheral vision of all time. But I do think Froy Gutierrez is Ryan. I think he was a weak spot.
I do too.
I really just... I to be honest with you, I almost felt I kept thinking and hoping that he was up to something else because he was acting in such a authentic way.
Yeah.
Like when he's like acting hard with the mechanics, the way he reacts to his girlfriend when she's scared. Like it just, the way he talked to the townspeople when he got the burgers.
Yeah, every interaction he had was weird.
He was weird. It felt like there was something else going on with him. And then when it turns out it doesn't, it just takes, you're like, oh, that's just how he acts. So he held this film back a little bit to me. I just couldn't get into, his character held me back from just really embracing the seriousness of the situation. But again, I think Madeline played well. And then everyone else, I don't think we need to name names, but like the typical scary town folk, right? Like even though this was Oregon, it felt like you were in Mississippi or something.
Definitely like Tucker and Dilver's evil vibes with some of the people in the town.
You're telling me in Oregon they don't have vegetarians? Get the fuck out.
Yeah, for real, right? Like Portland probably has per capita the most vegetarians of anywhere in the country. I think in the Strangers universe, as always, like the one of the reasons it's so eerie is there is not a lot of character development. Like, we don't know anyone in this universe, and that's what makes it so fucking scary. And that's sort of the fear that I think a lot of people have with making this a three-parter is like the more you get to know the killers, like that makes them less fearful to us because now they're unmasked. But I do think that this, in terms of acting and cast, is something we're gonna have to revisit after the third one because I feel like there was a lot of characters briefly introduced, part of the reason to make us suspicious and not trust anyone in this universe that we met. And obviously there will be some reveals in the coming movies. And so we don't really know who has what role. But like you said, the Ryan was one when you brought up the fact that like he could have been in on it, or him having asthma sort of being an allusion to the original Strangers, where the Scarecrow killer has asthma. That would have been a really cool little twist, but that obviously doesn't happen in this movie. Doesn't mean it couldn't happen later. But I'm assuming he is dead. He got pretty fucking stabbed.
Yeah, and then he like choked on his blood. I felt
Yeah.
like that was kind of.
So please don't bring it back from that.
Yeah.
All right, we move on to story. Again, not typically the point of the Strangers movies is there's really not much except for a home invasion. But IMDb says after their car breaks down in an eerie small town, a young couple is forced to spend the night in a remote cabin. Panic ensues as they are terrorized by three masked strangers who strike with no mercy and seemingly no motive. And we said off the top, take away the first 12 minutes where we see the guy who is on the missing poster in the diner running in the woods from the strangers, and then Madeline and Ryan's car breaking down and going to the Airbnb. Once you get past that, that's all new and is, I'm assuming, world building for the trilogy. It is basically a shot for shot almost remake of the original Strangers. So, Cycly, what did you think of the story, the addition it had, and then the decision, very conscious, to basically mimic the OG Strangers?
Yeah, I think the story. Okay, I really think you'll like this movie more. Again, we're in the spoilers one, and I doubt anyone is listening that hasn't seen it by this point. But I really think you'll enjoy this movie more if you haven't seen the first one, because the story is identical, right? Like, I don't know how to even break down the story. Outside of, they try to do slight things different. This is a happy couple starting their life in a new city. The original story has a couple that's on the verge of maybe breaking up and collapse after being told she didn't want to marry him. But the concept and the overall story is the same. And it's really hard to break down and say, well, it's the Strangers. What else can you do, right? Like, do you really want to do too much? Which I think Prey at Night maybe did a little too much, if that's where you want to get to. But then at the same time, you credit it for doing something new. The story, I think I'm going to break down this way. I think they kept it they wanted to kind of remake the first one for the new generation, for new audiences, and then tell a bigger story as a part of that. And to do that bigger story, they had to revisit and recreate the first one. So I think that's why people are kind of down on it right now, because what was the point of the story? It's just the same thing. What did it introduce to us? I'm still withholding judgment on the story until I see chapter 2 and maybe chapter 3. Because other than that, what is there to say about the story? So what about you?
Yeah, it's tough too, because, and this is kind of what we've run into a lot with movies recently, and I know people complain about it, but like when you see a movie and it ends with "to be continued," which like Spider-Verse did that last summer, and literally that is the ending card, right? Is "to be continued." It's like, it's kind of annoying because it's like, I paid to go see this movie and you're not telling me a complete story. You also kind of respect it narratively, and I think it's something the Strangers are trying, and I do give them credit for that. But like, how do you really judge this when it would be like reading again like the first 4 chapters of a 12-chapter book and then being like, how do I, at face value decide what I just read?
Exactly.
I totally agree with what you said. If you've seen the original that's why I'm kind of confused who this movie's for, because if it's for us, like the OG Stranger fans, you pretty much showed us the first movie again, but to it wasn't quite as effective, which nothing can be.
No.
So you're going to kind of alienate those people. Then if it's for brand new fans to the franchise, they watch it and they're just thinking like, okay, but it's part 1 of 3. So it's hard to judge. I'm not angry about it. I get some of the venom online. I do think that the first like 12 to 15 minutes of the movie are like the interesting part to this, and then the rest of it is again just the original one. I would be interested to see if someone says this isn't a shot for shot remake outside of the first 12 minutes, because I think you'd be really trying to do some mental gymnastics to say it's not.
I mean, yeah, even if it's not like verbatim shot to shot, the intent is shot to shot. I mean, the ways, like, again, the what happens to their escape vehicles, the guy leaving the girl at home alone for a little bit, innocent bystander getting killed on accident, like. the car, them being attacked by the car. They go off
Yeah.
into the woods, whatever. Someone gets hurt and an ankle.
Hurts
There's
his ankle.
too many similarities here to try and convince someone that this is a story. And again, that's why I think you have to look at it as the lens. Like, maybe I'm being optimistic. I should have been hurt before with the Halloween trilogy that came out a few years ago, and thinking they had an overall story going on. And I was like, after the second one, I was like, hey, you know what? There's an intent here. Maybe I'm about to walk into that exact same track. But Jeff, what are you and I are the best at on the pod? Getting suckered into this shit.
Getting hurt again. Yeah.
Oh, another Saw movie. Fucking going, baby.
I'm out on M. Night Shyamalan. Well, he has a movie coming out next week. Let's get tickets.
I could go, yeah. So again, am I going to learn my lesson? Probably not. But I'm going to be optimistic and say, hey, this movie got me to the theaters. That's all at the end of the day, and I'm entertained. It's an hour and 25 minutes. Like,
I love
you can eat that up.
Respect the hell out of the runtime. The first 12 minutes and the last 2 minutes have me very, very excited. And I still think like the scares to me were effective, but it's just tough. It's like watching a cover band. It's like, oh, you guys are really good, but you're not the original one.
Right. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. Okay. Best scene. What did you have? Again, like you said, it's tough because anything they did from the original Strangers, it's an impossible bar to clear for me in terms of horror. Like if you want to try and do that again, and then the new stuff, some of it's a little cliche, but it's also like in a vacuum, it's really hard to judge it. So do you have a favorite scene and what is it?
Yeah, for me, it would absolutely. So again, why we love The Strangers, why it was 2008, one of the scariest movie going experiences of our life. There's a sense of realism that you get with these movies, right? Like this can happen, like this can happen tomorrow.
Well, the opening,
tonight.
Well, just take it from me. It
does. So because I am such a fan of the first one, and because I felt like this one was sometimes a cheap knockoff of the first one, I didn't really have a favorite scene to call out because I had already seen it. Any of the things that were impactful. So really the opening scene to me, and they do kind of do this in 2008, where they allude like this is a serious crime, like this is a true story. This is something that happens in America on a daily basis, if not every 30 seconds. In that sense, that always sets the tone to me. And that opening, the FBI stats, I know this is maybe a cop-out because it's not really a scene of the movie, but it gets you in the mindset of why The Strangers is scary, right? It's not Michael Myers. It's not this guy who is almost superpower, super villain. It's not nonsensical. It's not ghost. This is something that's always happening. And, I was outside after watching this movie last night. Was with the dogs at like 10:30 at night. And I live in a very like tree heavy area. And, it's dark and there's just like an ambiance. And I'm like, what if someone was standing right there? How freaked the fuck out would I be? And so like, that just, again, it takes you back and says to you like, hey, this isn't just a possibility. It is decently probable that it might happen to someone one day. Not necessarily like this, but a violent crime in general, which I've been a victim of. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's part of the fear is, like you said, it's not some like demon possessing a person or something like Michael Myers, where yes, it's based on a home invasion, but you can put the guy in like a fucking trash compactor and he'll walk out the other side. Where it's like, oh, okay, well, that's not that fearful. This is real. Now, let me ask you this: the opening to the 2008 one and this one again, you said start with similar title cards with the statistics of the amount of violent crimes in this country. If I remember right, the 2008 one then just basically cuts to them like getting ready to leave the wedding. This one cuts to someone who we find out later was a earlier victim of the Strangers, but running in the woods. What do you think was more effective? Because it's weird in the '08 one, you get like this very harrowing statistic, and then you just see this couple who, of course, we know is going to be the victims. Then in this one, you actually see a violent crime take place.
Yeah, I would go with the first one mainly because, again, what I said at the beginning of this topic, the sense of realism. And all of a sudden that movie starts with a very real couple who's, like whether or not they're breaking up or whatever they're going through, whether failed proposal, it doesn't matter how many people have had that relationship, any relationship in the car where you've gotten in a fight after leaving an event. And it's just like both people are dealing with something and it's just relatable.
Yeah.
It's just how many everyone can put themselves in that position. And so, and then all of a sudden it's a good opening to get the guy running. But at the same time, I have no connection to this person. I don't know what his story is or why he's being killed, right? I mean, I can assume. But a couple that's had a bad night, a bad argument, that anyone can feel that.
Someone I saw online said that like one of the things that kind of took them out of it was like it looked too good. The Strangers Chapter 1 visually, like we start with like this really nice drone shot of the woods, and the first Strangers, I think part of what was so harrowing about it was like the aesthetic was like kind of grainy, and it was like the point of it was to be like, hey, this is not some $200 million budget film. Like we're basically voyeurs. It was what made it so kind of creepy.
Yeah.
This one almost looked too good for its own good. All right, my favorite scene, basically the one that, pun intended, set the table for this whole trilogy upcoming, and that would be the diner scene with Maya and Ryan. Because although it feels very cliche, it's what has all the theories running rampant based off of it. It's when they meet all the other characters in the movie and their car breaks down under some kind of suspicious circumstances, and then it almost feels in retrospect that they are sort of led to this Airbnb, but again, we could be being paranoid, by people in the town. It also has one of my favorite lines in the movie when the waitresses overhear that Ryan has been with Maya for 5 years and hasn't proposed to her, and one of them goes, "What are you waiting for?" And he goes, "Right now I'm just waiting for my turkey sandwich."
Like, that's such a douchey comment, bro. Like, that's why I'm like, something was up with this guy. He seemed like a douche after.
Also, I'm like, you just ordered it, dude.
Like, literally 30 seconds ago.
You're like, I don't even know if the woman gave it to the kitchen yet, so maybe chill out. Based on that scene, though, Cycly, I know that, I don't know. Let me just get your prediction real quick before we even get to the end of this. So, do you think that there is a world where that scene basically just exists to produce red herrings? Or do you think, I mean, because you meet probably 5 or 6 different people who could be viable candidates as the Strangers. And then also, I'm assuming the earlier victim of theirs who were clearly shown on that wanted poster on the wall, and the people in the diner give the story of him. That has to play a role in this somehow.
Do you have any turkey melt, Jeff? He got the turkey melt.
Holy shit. I forgot about that. That's when Ryan was good as dead.
So it's weird because it very much felt like red herring, setting up again the mechanics. They saw the car come in. All of a sudden the car doesn't work. Is that real? We don't know. But he does see town folk while the atrocities are happening.
Yeah, right? There's like a lot of other people partying in this town.
So, like he goes and he recognizes some of the people from the diner, and he sees the mechanic when he goes get his inhaler from the car. So is that the movie ruling those people out specifically? It's very interesting.
They're kind of douchey to him too, right? The other people, when he won't drink with them.
No, they go, he thinks he's better than us.
Which again doesn't mean that they're murderers.
Yeah, he's like, no. So I don't know. It very much does like the creepy town Tale and Tucker versus Evil type thing. Like, these people think city life is dangerous. City people think that's, country life is scary and dangerous. I don't know if it had enough connection that, like, if it is one of those people, or at least at this point, we haven't got to know them yet, that if they had revealed themselves to be someone from the diner, I don't know if at the moment it would be as meaningful as these are 3 random people and it could happen to anyone at any time, any day.
Yeah. Definitely a lot to think about going forward, which is what kind of has me sort of reinvigorated with this franchise, even though this movie in and of itself probably wasn't super standout. The concept of telling the story over 3 parts and letting us sort of ruminate on who could be behind it, what their motive could be, is interesting to me and new to this franchise. All right. I think we both can have pretty similar things here. Rewatchability. I mean, with any type of like movie that's predicated on fear and jump scares and building paranoia, it's very difficult to get a good second watch out of them. This, I think, when we have the trilogy complete, though, it will probably be really cool to go back and see like hints or Easter eggs that were very present in this that we just didn't notice. And Cycly, to your point about rewatchability when it's all over, you did say before pod that you read that all 3 of the Strangers movies coming out, this one, I'm assuming Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 will be their titles, were shot in one go in a 52-day stretch.
Yeah, I believe so, in Bratislava.
Okay, so continuity among the movies is probably going to be a strength here. So rewatchability right now, I would probably say not good for this movie, but when all 3 come out, it might be cool to go back and see like what were things that they were teasing or things that were there that we just didn't pick up on, that once we had the whole story completed, now we notice. How about you?
Yeah, long term, I think the rewatchability is almost near zero. And one of the reasons why it's not because I think this movie is so horrible or anything like that. I mean, I enjoyed it for what it was. I just think if I'm going to rewatch it, I'll rewatch the first one. And to your point, and like what it means for the second and third one. I mean, I'm obviously going to have to withhold judgment until I see those. But I think there's going to be a part of me where I kind of machete Star Wars order this, where it's like I'm going to pick and choose how I do this because I can see myself rewatching the first one, convincing my story that this first one's story continues immediately after with chapter 2 with obviously a different character, but just just put it in your head that this is the same person. That Liv Tyler is now Maya, and just watch the second
Oh
and
yeah.
third one. Like why can't that be the case? Why can't chapter 1 be the original? Again, you're right. We're not getting the town folk. We're not getting the city, but you already have that information in your mind.
Somebody can edit that into it.
Yeah, it could be like I said. You can machete order this thing. So it's like I could see myself, unless something fundamental happens in the second and third one that makes me want to go back and say, "Whoa, I missed that Easter egg," like you said. I can see myself plugging the original in as chapter 1. That's what I think is likely to happen.
Yeah, it's definitely a better version of this movie without the quote unquote world building that happens in the first.
Yeah, let's take the first 10 minutes, 12 minutes, like you said, put it at the very beginning of the original.
All right, last of our 5 criteria is basically our catch-all, impact. So I guess the first thing I want to ask you, you saw this with your wife last night. She basically hated it, you said. Can you convince her, you think, to go see chapter 2 in theaters?
Oh yeah, I'll convince her.
Okay.
Okay, so again, we both looked at it in different ways, and I think that's the biggest problem with the impact. And I don't know how many people are aware of what the intent of this movie is. More than 80% of my theater walked out before the mid-credits scene.
Damn.
And
I told you to tell them to stay.
I know. I told you they threw popcorn at me.
It's only 2 minutes into the credits, people. Chill.
I stood up in front of us and hi everyone, and they started booing and throwing things at me, and I didn't even get it out.
It's not effective.
Like I know, because I know this is chapter 2 and chapter 3 coming, because I know it was filmed all together. That made the impact not as like I wasn't as taken aback by the lack of like authenticity in this film, right? Like I'm looking at it as saying this is 1/3 of a story. And it's easy for me to look at it in that lens. My wife was looking at it as this is one movie, and this is the movie we came to see. And she was very frustrated and upset that this was almost like they took all the good things from the first one and did it again,
watered them
not
down
as
a little bit.
Yeah. And then and I said this to you last night on text. And here's the thing: they copied even the song on the record player, right?
Yeah, I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, it's the same song. They still say Tamra. They still say all these things. Yet the most iconic line in the original, why are you doing this? Because you were home. That is the most fucking like chill-wrenching line maybe in scary movies. It's up there for sure in top 10. And in this one, after copying everything, they go with because you're here. That's
I've been going back and forth
worse
on this. Do you think, though, we'd be more angry if they just straight up said the same line? Then we'd be like, dude, what are you doing? Like, you riff it off completely.
Were you mad about them saying Tamra or
no? But they also use Tamra and Pray at Night. Like that's their
right. So why can't sing because you're home be their thing? I don't know. If I was,
they just have to hope they get asked that.
I mean, like I'd be like, yeah, because you're a fucking home, bitch. Don't answer the door. We're teaching you a lesson. Like I don't know. I mean, I get why someone's, but if you're saying you just want to be different, then why did you do everything else the same? I think.
Yeah.
But that's the difference between my wife. I'm going to withhold full impactful judgment overall on the story, the impact. I'm going to say again, it's very odd that they're doing this with a franchise that was so big in 2008, and for some reason they did nothing with, and now they're trying to do this.
And a lot of times you'll see people like take an IP, quote unquote, and they'll really just use it to get you in, like Joker, for example, like Todd Phillips. Uses Joker to get you in the theater, and then he tells his own story, which is great. This crosses, it's so the opposite of that. Like, it goes so far past even being a love letter to the original Strangers. It's like a psychotic, like, prisoner writing to someone who he's obsessed with, because this is the same movie with, you can tell that they were like, well, we have a 3-story arc. Why don't we just put the bookends of this movie as like the new stuff, the connective tissue, and then let's just play the classics in the middle. So the impact here, I think it's going to play to I would be interested to hear the opinion of someone who has never seen the first one, or maybe at least doesn't hold it because in the high regard that you and I do, because it's basically like an untouchable film in my mind. This first Strangers. It's in my
honestly,
top 100.
if you're listening and haven't seen the first one, I mean, I don't blame. Like, I get different generations, or maybe you just missed it. But let us know because I have a theory. If you've seen the first one, I don't think you'll like this movie as much. If you haven't seen the first one, let us know what you thought about it, because I actually think you might have enjoyed it more than most. I really could see that scenario, that someone coming in blindly found it scary and original.
And it's been 16 years since the first one, so maybe they definitely made it with that audience in mind. But also having it be The Strangers again, like there is a built-in audience for it, so you're also playing to those people as well. So it's kind of an interesting choice that they made.
I think coming out early summer, they're playing to the college kids, high school kids.
Which we're old as fuck now, so
I know.
It's not
I mean, that's where we were when the first one came out, man. Like, we were all about it. So it's like, that's where I can see it resetting the generation. They know they were going to get us in the theater, and now they're going for a new generation.
All right, last thing I want to ask. You talked about this a little bit off pod, but I want our listeners to hear it too. So you spoke about how our theater experience for the first Strangers, to me, it's like one of my most memorable theater going experiences. It's up there, even though there could not be more disparate, with like Avengers Endgame in terms of sharing a theatrical moment with other people. You going to see this, obviously it's not going to play the same way, but did you feel at all like the people in the theater were like scared and felt this weird feeling of isolation, even though there's someone right next to you, even to a smaller degree what we had? Or was it like your typical slasher horror movie where someone's like, bitch, get out the room?
Yeah, it was weird. I told you yesterday, my theater, you and I had different experiences, which I feel like yours would have been creepier. I'll let you get into that. I had an almost completely full theater. And there was teenagers, young people, everyone.
It's good for the movie.
Yeah, it's good for the movie. I didn't get that sense of fear. I got a little like, oh shit, or you idiots, like, why are you doing that? Like, oh, come on, he's standing in the shower and she doesn't see him. Like, there was a lot of that. I will say, people got the most vocal is when he doesn't shoot pinup girl.
Yeah.
And people are like going like, come on, that's so dumb. Like, this is such a trope. Like, him just going off on talking. I didn't feel like I didn't hear anyone scream or gasp. I did hear a couple people laugh a couple times at some corny scenes, like not intending to be funny. And then oddly, the movie ended and like 4 people clapped, which was weird.
That's always an odd thing.
Yeah, I'm like, are you being sarcastic or did you really I don't know. So this movie experience didn't have that. It was 100% lacking that fear. But your experience was as polar opposite, which I mean, I would have been creeped out if I had yours.
Yeah, I went in the middle of the day, which I like to do during the summer. I'm a school teacher, so I have a little bit of time off now. It was storming outside of my theater. Like, I had to sprint in from my car. It was like thunder and lightning for like 3 straight hours. And I was the only person in my theater, literally. So it was, the environment was much different from yours. It was a very small theater as well. And it was normally my theater, like they actually keep the theaters pretty warm. It was freezing too, so I was like bundled up. It's storming outside. I'm watching these people get killed.
It's cozy. Do you have popcorn at least?
I snuck in some snacks.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so it was very different from yours. It was very enjoyable. Maybe that's why I enjoyed it a little bit more than you. I think it was like a more of a it had me in the right mindset. Yeah, exactly.
I think I've said this to you. I watched the movie Unsane, where I was the only person in the theater, and I don't think that movie's inherently scary at all. It's eerie, but that movie, it gave me the creeps because I was watching it by myself. And that movie intends like you to feel like someone's watching you, and so like I think that has a massive impact on how we feel about movies.
No director will ever say like the ideal viewing experience for my film was to be alone because they want to make money. I saw Midsommar by myself in the theater.
Oh, that one thing you lacked there was when Midsommar ended, the few people in the theater all felt like we had a bond.
Yeah, we saw some fucked up stuff.
We've been through something together, and I'll never forget.
Yeah, that's true. You come out the other end, and you're closer. You're close with total strangers.
Yeah.
All right, Cycling, before we let the people go for The Strangers Chapter 1, any closing thoughts on the film?
Lock your doors and tell people Tamra is across the street.
And if your name is Tamra, just invite them in and see what happens.
Yeah. Be like, we're playing some Mario Kart. Come on in.
Yeah, we just got the cheese board out,
I guarantee
actually.
you the strangers aren't prepared for that scenario.
They'll lose at Mario Kart and then they'll get pissed, and that's what will be the impetus for them murdering you.
Imagine if they were, I want to see a movie where they're like sick freaks and they bring Tamra in because they're also killers.
That's gross. Do you think Tamra, they picked a name like, hey, let's ask for someone who, like, no one's been named Tamra in like 48 years, or they all live in like Palm Beach, Florida, and are like white trash hair salon owners?
Yeah, it's it's a weird enough. It's like, yeah, it's not like the most common name, but it's also not like so abnormal if you meet a Tamra.
Yeah, they're not
so
like, is Octavius here? Like, huh?
No, that would be
that's a human being that's existed since like ancient Rome.
Is Aaron?
All right, for our legal counsel, Ronnie Cycli, I'm the mayor, Jeff Hornacek, and we are the Bro Force Squad podcast. Thank you guys so much for checking us out. You can find us on Twitter or X at Bro Force Squad. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you find podcasts at. If you type in Bro Force Squad as 3 separate words, and you can find everything we've ever posted in our squad blog on our website, broforcesquad.com. Till next time, Cycli, I found this weird mask in the closet. Let's try it on just for fun.
Did you see they had a pig mask?
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, there was a pig mask on the wall, and it's the same production company as Saw.
Oh yeah, Lionsgate. Holy shit, connected universe?
I don't know. I saw that. I was like, pig